Am I on? I am. Thank you for coming out on this burning hot day in the city. In the liberated zone. I like saying that. Sankofa Books and Cafe. My name is Brian Gilmore, as was said, and I'm here with the poet Paul Catafago from Queens, and he ran into some other people in here from Queens. We won't talk about the other person from Queens who's in this town. But I met Paul years ago, of course, poetry and political struggle, and as always, the two connect very easily, at least for me.
What's the word?
Rafiq, which means comrade, right? I was told that by Paul years ago, that Rafiq is Arabic for comrade. And I have an essay in a book on Third World Press called Rafiq. And I'll read a little bit of piece of it later on when we get into the discussion. But right now, I just want to thank Sankofa Books for hosting this again. Holly Garima and fam and friends and everybody. Please support this institution, doing great things in our city. And I'll read just a little bit of Paul's extensive bio here, because he's one of those poets who's been doing that work for the people and by the people with his literature. And you don't see him at the National Book Awards and stuff like that. But there's so many poets like that who are not institutional poets. They're poets of the people. Right. So he's a writer, spoken word poet, and cultural organizer. Born and raised in Queens, New York, to political refugees, his work is informed by his Palestinian and Lebanese roots. He is the author of Samud, Poems of the Palestinian Diaspora. He holds a BA in journalism from Long Island University and has worked as a journalist for Maryknoll magazine. He also holds an MA in theological studies from Maryknoll School of Theology, where he studied with Dr. Mark Ellis, a leading Jewish theologian who advocated solidarity between Israeli Jews and Palestinians. He lives in New Orleans now, and he's got a lot of stories about New Orleans as well. That'll probably be in the next book. But his latest book is very interesting, and I hope people who watch this later, who don't catch it now, it's on Bodily Press. It's called The Palestinian Freedom Now Suite. And I know those of you all out there who listen to jazz know what that reference is. I don't have to say it. He can talk about that. And it's a very outstanding collection of poetry. Hopefully he will get invited to some other places. And he's going to read some poetry, and then we'll have some discussion, and then he'll read more poetry. But feel free to become part of our conversation here. I mean, we're definitely going to give you a chance to chime in and ask him questions, comment on what you think. But I'm very excited about this reading and conversation with Paul Catafago.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you, everybody at Sankofa, for opening your doors to me. And we were, when the book came out, well, before it was coming out about a month and a half ago, we were talking with Brian, and I have another friend here, Hani Almadoun, who works for UNRWA USA, which is the largest charity that helps the Palestinian refugees in Gaza. And he also has the Gaza Soup Kitchen. So it's like sort of 2 point people in Washington, D.C. And I wanted sort of like to do readings in D.C. because it's 3 readings in 3 days. And the first one was yesterday at the Museum of the Palestinian People in DuPont Circle. And so I called it's a mini tour like in the loud mouth of empire. So I wanted to sort of confront, and I had no way of knowing what was going to happen, what's happening now, and the level of sort of familiarity being from a people that have been occupied, and you know, it's almost like everything's coming to a head now. And so when Brian and I were talking, he invited me to the American Poetry Museum that Brian's a board member of. And we're doing that tomorrow, by the way, 3 o'clock. And I urge everyone to come out. And that's going to be, each reading has been a little different. That's going to be more spoken word, and there's a great jazz band, and it's called the Reuben Carter Jazz Set. No, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. The Reuben Jackson, who's Reuben Carter. Who's Reuben Carter? The boxer, right? Yeah. Yeah. That must be some subliminal. Who did time, right? Like falsely accused. Where's my brain? No. No, Reuben Jackson is very humbling, and I always joke that Reuben had like my ideal job because Reuben was the archivist, the jazz archivist at the Smithsonian. And so it's very humbling and I'm very honored to be doing that with Carl Carter Jr. is a great poet, also a lawyer like Brian, right? And we've discussed this, that I come from a family of attorneys. My brother in New York is an attorney. My father was educated in the University of Paris in Cairo and never practiced a day in his life because they did Islamic law. And my mom's dad was a judge in Lebanon. And so you know, like if we try to message and you do like the compartmentalization stuff, that's very familiar to me. I said, well, but Brian's a great poet. There's what's his name, the Puerto Rican guy, Martin Espada, who was also a tenant lawyer, tenant advocate. So I'm very moved by this, and so I guess we're gonna start reading poetry.
Go ahead, however you want to do it, man.
Okay.
And
So we did yesterday, the reading was more like a reading. We had a little discussion. Today's a combination. Brian's going to read you some things he's written. And tomorrow's going to be spoken word because there's a great jazz band at the American Poetry Museum. So I guess we'll need glasses. Where's my bag? Oh. Well, I guess you can. This is called a type of Palestinian. You can be a Palestinian, you know, in the USA, even in a time of genocide, you know. But don't call the genocide of your people a genocide. And you must disavow Hamas and all forms of resistance, especially armed struggle. You must even condemn the peaceful student encampments for justice in Palestine. And you can never talk about the Nakba or occupation or apartheid or blockade. You must prove you're a good, hardworking Muslim, or even better, a Palestinian Christian who, in the eyes of some, isn't really a Christian, because we all know Jesus was born in Kansas and had blonde hair and blue eyes, you know, and all Arabs are Muslims, you know. You can be a Palestinian even here in New Orleans in the Deep South. As long as you put your head down and work 10 times harder than a white man. They will even let you own a business like, say, a restaurant and serve delicious Palestinian food. And you can call it that, but maybe it's better you say you serve Middle Eastern food, or even better, Mediterranean food, because you don't want to offend anyone. Because face it, the word Palestinian can be offensive. Because even though you are connected to the over 50,000 Palestinians Israel, funded by the U.S., has slaughtered in Gaza since October 2023, you can't talk about the genocide. Because you are a hard-working, tax-paying, no-drama American, and most people, when they come to your restaurant, I mean most white people, when they come to eat your delicious falafel, they think you are Lebanese because that is a kinder, gentler Arab. And don't let them ever see your rage. You can be a Palestinian writer, a Palestinian poet, as long as you write about poor, dying Palestinian children, as long as you show you are not a member of the resistance and you assure everyone you are not violent and your grammar is better than the fucking King of England himself. And they will publish your tales of a mythic Palestine and longing, and it is so romantic and they are so progressive and cool to publish an Arab like you. You can be a Palestinian in America, but do not be angry in public. Do not say you believed in the armed struggle. Write about dead Palestinians. Beg, yes, beg for your life. They love that. Show them how merciful and kind and generous they are. Ask for their charity, but never ever demand your grandfather's land back. Never say Zionism is racism. Never ever say that Zionist terrorist thugs stole your grandfather's land. Never tell them the truth. Talk about Palestine as a dream and innocuous fairy tale. Never talk about the right to return. You should be the perfect immigrant, always grateful they let a swarthy heathen like you in the U.S. Put your head down and say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and always say thank you, even when they bomb the shit out of your people in your homeland. You must always say thank you. And how do you like your falafel? Never talk about our food has been appropriated, how the food you serve is indeed Palestinian. And you can do anything in the United States that you want as long as it's legal and you pay your taxes. But you must always disavow Palestinian resistance and convince them you are not a terrorist. But you can also never talk about Zionist terrorism. You cannot publicly support boycotting Israel because boycotting Israel is seen as an act of terror. You must put your head down, work like a dog, and smile. That is the type of Palestinian they want, the meek and mild Palestinian. The please, sir, please don't kill us Palestinian, always trying to convince racists we are not anti-Semitic. But I am not that type of Palestinian. I'm not a meek and mild Palestinian. I am an angry Palestinian. I will write about the olive trees they uprooted, and I will say I am the roots, my comrades are the roots, all Palestinians are the roots of our olive trees. All my children will be born the roots of Palestinian resistance. I will tell you, yes, we are mourning our dead. We are in deep, deep grief, but understand before the massacres, before the genocide, we consider the land that was ours, that will always be ours, sacred. We have always considered the land sacred. Imagine now, as they have made Gaza a burial ground, now the land is even more sacred, a sacred burial ground. We cannot be defiled. The oppressors have tried to defile us, but have only defiled themselves. What does it say about countries that kill children indiscriminately, that bomb hospitals and churches and mosques and schools, all the while talking about humanity and civilization? I see them. I see through their lies. I am the Palestinian who calls the hypocrisy and struggles against the brutality. I am that type of Palestinian, the one that was born amongst them, educated in their schools. I stand with my people. I stand with Palestine. I stand with free Palestine. I am an uppity Palestinian, the one that doesn't look for their pity or beg for their charity. I am a fierce, proud Palestinian. I will return to my land. There is nothing you can do about it. I am the type of Palestinian that scares the shit out of anyone who doesn't support total Palestinian liberation. I am that type of Palestinian. I am that type of Palestinian.
Thank you. Just pause here for a second to welcome everybody else who came in here. This is Paul Codifago, poet. I'm just going to ask him a quick question here before he goes to the next poem. Is talk about the title of the book a little bit.
So, in 1960, the great jazz musician, drummer Max Roach, also a great civil rights and human rights activist, and also I know you are like an internationalist, so Max Roach had an album called the Freedom Now Suite. And the album, it says, we insist, the Freedom Now Suite, and his brothers at a lunch counter, right, in 1960. So when we were trying to come up with, the poem actually came after the book, the book title. So I talked to the editor, the publisher, very progressive fellow in Amherst, Massachusetts. So he's a jazz musician, young cat, like 40 years old. Can't distribute or promote the shit out of anything. He's not a business person, but he's an artist. And so he said, like, just as a jazz musician, he thought it was a great title. And then I had to write the poem, The Palestinian Freedom Suite, to justify the book. And the book, the poem I just wrote, I read, a lot of the poems were written after October, sort of as a, as a response. So we've talked about like the influence of June Jordan, and the first poet I ever read in college in Brooklyn that made me feel I wanted to be a poet was like sophomore year of college was T.S. Eliot, and just the way he made the women come and go. Speaking of Michelangelo. But the more you read Eliot and the more deeper you go in, the guy was a racist, and he was an apologist and a champion of he's a guy from St. Louis who went to England because he loved the British Empire. And I was just getting involved with the Palestinian movement and really like leftist Palestinian politics. And I said, I can't read this shit. Even though it's pretty and it's beautiful. And then someone turned me on to June Jordan, and it changed everything. And so when you read, Palestinians always talk about the stuff she wrote about Palestine, but poem about our rights, which I think is one of the great, not just political poems, one of the great. And she does this courageous thing where she talks about her rape, and she equates it with the incursion into Namibia. Yeah. And look at that courage. And I know she was dismissed as a polemicist, And fucking, excuse my language, I'm from Queens, but no, but like for years, all the time she was alive, Poetry magazine never published her, and now they're publishing like portfolios about her, and sort of like it's very cynical, riffing off the thing of Palestine. And when she was alive, like they didn't even give her any play. But she carved her own thing, the people's poetry thing, and she carved solidarity, and it's sort of a thing. I mentioned like Edel Adnan, a great Lebanese poet, a great advocate in Lebanon. Then she went to California, and they were great friends. And then I think Alice Walker got the Palestinian bug from the Palestinian, because we're talking about solidarity. It's more than that. It's love. It's family. The guy who just killed the journalist Anas. Anas is the cousin of my buddy, Hani. Like I saw him yesterday. He's in deep grief. And his brothers have been killed, like two of his brothers, the Gaza Soup Kitchen. And for us, it's like, oh, this is polemicist. It's not. It's family, And they always like they dismiss it. Well, it's not, and then it's not art, Well, they're lucky that I'm doing this, because if I didn't do this, I'd be buying guns. I say like it's a joke, but poetry for me is cheaper than therapy and less bloody than murder. So,
Wait, check.
Yeah.
Read another poem.
I'm so happy that we're here, and Brian's the great. And Brian's gonna, when I get the murder charge, Brian's gonna be my attorney. So I'm sorry.
You're gonna say on the air that you're gonna murder somebody.
Is this being recorded?
You want me
No, but I'm gonna
wait.
I'm gonna be like Trump now. No, I'm gonna be like Trump now. I didn't say it. He said it. I didn't do that. He did it. Obama did it. Oh, where are we gonna go here? Oh, I guess identification. Well, let's do the title.
Go ahead.
The Palestinian Freedom Now Suite. From the river to the sea, free, 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 Palestinians will be free.
Forgot the glasses again.
It's like a denial of age. From of the inevitable. The Palestinian Freedom Now Suite. From the river to the sea, free, 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 Palestinians will be free. Free from occupation and apartheid, free from goddamn genocide, free from imperialism, free from settled colonialism, free, free, free. Palestinians free from philosophies like white Christian supremacy and Zionism that say Palestinian lives do not matter. Free, free, free. Free from forced famine, free from atrocities, from a state that is not held accountable, free from famine, free from lack, free from violence, free from ethnic cleansing, free, free, free. Free like the olive tree and free like the sea, free, 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 free Jews, free Christians, free Muslims, free from the idea that disparate people cannot live in justice and peace, free from economies that thrive on conflict and militarism, Free, 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 free from the rage and the grief, free from your complicity and silence, free from the lie that all human beings are not connected, free from the notion that one people's suffering has more value than another's, free, 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 free from apathy and pedantry, free, 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 free from borders and walls, free from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free, free, free. This is a poem called Identification. They said they wanted a Palestinian poet. When I showed up, I knew they were disappointed. They said, you don't have a typical Palestinian name. I said, my family has roots, hundreds of years, possibly thousands in Palestine. And what is a typical Palestinian name anyway? My name, Paul, is a popular name amongst Palestinian Christians, I said. They asked, shocked, they are Palestinian Christians? Then they told me, you speak with a New York accent and your poems don't always mention Palestine, and many of them aren't even about Palestine. And I said, I'm Palestinian. My life has been threatened because I'm Palestinian. That's very Palestinian. And they always give me a hard time at the airport in Tel Aviv near Jaffa, which they used to call the city of poets, the city where my father was born. That's very Palestinian. And my father's family owned orange groves. They were in the orange business in Jaffa. That's very Palestinian. And when I went to Palestine the first time, I was shot at by soldiers of the Israeli Defense Forces. That's very Palestinian. And when I leave occupied Palestine, the young Israeli customs officer at the airport always asks me, did you meet with Palestinian Arabs? That's very Palestinian. Yes, I met with Palestinian Arabs because they make really good food and they like telling jokes, but they also have a lot of pathos. And I'm a poet. I like pathos. That's very Palestinian. And yeah, you're right. I have a New York accent because I was born in exile to political refugees in Queens, New York City, and being born in exile to political refugees is a very Palestinian thing. Yes, I speak with a New York accent, but if you want me to effectuate a Levantine accent, like pronouncing P's as B's, like Paul the Palestinian poet becomes Ball the Palestinian poet, I could do that. I could accommodate you. That's very Palestinian. How much are you paying? Poets aren't supposed to talk about money, especially Palestinian poets in exile. Then they asked me, can you write more Palestinian poems? Palestinian poems? I said, listen, I could have been born on Mars and speak with a Martian accent, but my lineage from my father's side is Palestinian. I'm Palestinian. So even if I write poems about donkeys, they are Palestinian poems. You feel me? And how much did you say you were paying?
Read a short excerpt from a book. It was published by Third World Press. It's a series of essays about Palestine and the struggle going on. And this is an essay called Rafik. Once again, for those who just came in, Paul is the one that told me that Rafik means in Arabic comrade, because I used to always call people comrade. So then he said, use Rafik. And this was inspired by him, so it was dedicated to him and another poet named Nada, who's Palestinian, and she lives in Canada, and she's also in this struggle. So I'm just going to read a little small piece, and then I'll ask Paul to talk more about the politics of the struggle and things, while asking him a question that I've already got in my head. Okay. To be an American today, as America continues to act as a world empire, it's like living with Al Capone. Yes, Al Capone, the Chicago gangster of American criminal folklore. Al does terrible things. He kills people. He rips people off. He takes from others by force. America, my country, does horrible things. America is Al Capone. As for this struggle, it supports Israel and its killing of Palestinians unconditionally. It provides the guns and bombs for the killings. Al buys the silence of most Americans with endless coffee shops, streaming services, and food and beverage on every street corner in most of America's big and large cities. There are booze, legal weed shops, and electrical charge stations for fancy new electric cars. You live with Al Capone, the world's worst gangster. Gaza and the Palestinian people are oppressed and occupied because of the United States. Children are dying in Gaza because of my country. If America pulled back its support, the last 75 years of Palestinian history would have been different. I have little doubt. It does not have to be like this. So I'll ask Paul if he thinks colonialism, and I did bring my copy of Amy says there notes on colonialism. I would say people should check that book out. But ask Paul, like, if the whole situation had gone differently, perhaps do you still think you would be here as an American? You live in the state. Would your family have? Do you think your family would have been forced to leave their homeland, the Arab world, and everything? No, go ahead. Answer the question.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I remember because I was in New York when September 11th happened, and they said, well, like this racist thing, like Little Bush and all that, about that the Arabs, they're jealous of us. Like, we were talking about this last night at the Museum of Palestinian thing. From my mom's side, the Phoenicia, the ancient Phoenicia, we invented language, like modern, the how do you say, the seeds of the European languages, including English, is the phonetic alphabet. We invented language. Like why am I jealous of that? And I'm not like like bragging or being a peacock. I'm just saying, like algebra in Egypt, right? Or even like the food. They said that, on PBS, like the Mediterranean diet is the thing. Like that's our food, right? And so, and I want to say, because this is one of the things, like Toni Morrison said, the worst thing about racism is that it's a distraction, right? And then it makes you identify, to signify, right? And so I'm writing this thing. I don't hate the thing. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of my grandmother's picture in the first book, and I'm proud of the thing, and I like the connection with jazz, but I would rather not always like push Palestine. I want to write about other stuff, but now like there's an urgency. They are literally trying the final solution. They are literally trying to erase us from our land. Which, when you ask me, why would we leave? I'm not saying it was. Mahmoud Darwish, the great Palestinian poet, had a book. Unfortunately, it was Paradise. But like, if you've ever been to, if you know the writing of Khalil Gibran or the songs, and I mentioned her here, the great Lebanese singer Fairuz, this is like paradise. They write about it in in the scriptures, like the land of milk and honey, like Ethiopia, like all these places. Afghanistan is very beautiful. They're different topographies, different climates, but they're beautiful places. Ethiopia is stunningly beautiful. Like cathedrals built out of stone. Why don't you have the guy and I don't want to get anything like Tiger Woods going to Dubai or whatnot, like, and they spend all these billions trying to like create Disneyland. Like who are you trying to like prove? Like what are you trying to prove? Who are you trying to the whole thing that white gays and you mentioned the American Book Award, and there are Palestinian, and it's family, so I don't talk about any other Palestinian writer or poet. It's family, but like. To me, this is my book award. This is my Pulitzer. When an artist that I love and respect, accepts me, and I can be in a space. We're talking about with Jonathan about creating, sort of community within the margins, like June Jordan did, right? And so, because you see what Alice Walker did, and it's not a criticism of hers, but the mainstream popularity of The Color Purple, right? Here's a woman whose mentor was Howard Zinn, who was Jewish. Whose husband, whose daughter is half Jewish, and they said she was anti-Semitic because she had the courage to go on one. Now the whole thing, the flotillas, and she was one of the early flotillas, and they said she was anti-Semitic. It's ridiculous, So answering your question, and I've been as a journalist, I've been in my family in Lebanon, and they say about Lebanon, but again, Lebanon and Palestine are very similar. They say Lebanon, it's one of the few places where you can you can ski and swim in the sea the same day. So they say it's like Switzerland. And the cosmopolitan nature of Beirut, they called it the Paris of the Middle East. Even when I was a kid, I was a communist, right? It's like I knew, right? I was always the thing. So I would, I was a Boy Scout. They forced me to be a Boy Scout. The only badge I ever got was recruiting other, like my friends, to be Boy Scouts. I don't even know how to tie like a knot, right? But they used to do the God Bless America, and just I had this contrarian thing where I would say God bless Australia, and the head guy or something, he would kind of catch it, and as soon as he looked, I said God bless America, and then when he didn't look, I said God bless Australia, and so when they said that Paris was the Beirut was the Paris of the Middle East, I would say Paris was the Beirut of Europe. And Switzerland was the Lebanon of Europe. Like, why is it all, the thing is a cliche, but like the white gaze. Why am I going to seek approval from people that have made it clear they want to exploit the fuck out of us, and if they can't do that, they'll erase us? So why do I want your approval? You've shown you don't love me. And so when I talk about, we talked about, you call these things corny, like there's the big trade show for small presses, the American Writers and Poets, the ALP, right? Like, they still haven't come out and not just genocide, but talked about against apartheid. Because they don't want to lose the funding. The Poetry Festival in New Orleans, where I've lived the last 11 years, will never invite me. Because I take a stand and say, they don't want to lose funding, so they don't talk about Palestine. Even though within themselves they have great compassion for us. Well, why don't you take a stand? Like so then my thing, you know what? They invited me to the Poetry Festival in Puerto Rico, and there's no, it's not even like, it's more than solidarity, it's love. Because they understand what they've gone through, and then they say, you know what, we're going to reach out. And so in November in El Salvador, Poetry Festival in El Salvador, and the things they've had to deal with, and it's all the one remnant, the one thread is colonialism. And say, well, Israel's not colonialism, it's this or that, or this mythic thing about a homeland and stuff like that. So am I crazy because I say, I want to return to my grandfather's land? That's crazy? Or is it more crazy than saying, well, 3,000 years ago, and in a project that was sort of designed by the Europe to, as a beachhead in that region of American capitalism and Anglo-capitalism, and Judeo-Christian sort of thing, but also as a way to oppress indigenous people, so, which are mostly Muslim, and they hate Muslims. So, and a lot of this, like the Crusades, right?
So you want to read some more from the book?
Yeah.
Maybe to give people the flavor of the jazz section of the book. Yep. He's got a jazz section in the book.
So Joni Eisenberg, who has a great show on WPFW, who is also from Queens and went to the monolithic Flushing High School, which I thought my high school, St. Francis Prep, had 5,000 people. Flushing had more, right? 6,000. And so when she invited me on the show, and Brian had set it up, and then we talked and we connected, and she said, well, our station is a lot of it, is like jazz and things. I said, well, and connecting with the African American community. And then I said, well, I have a whole section on jazz. And she said, oh. So, and then people ask me, well, how is that connected to Palestinian resistance and things? Well, it's a music of revolution and reclamation, and a diasporic music, and going back to roots. So, yeah.
And I will say that in the back of the book, there's a great section on the notes for the jazz section.
So the notes, that was like, because Elliot Cardinal, the very well-meaning, sort of privileged and delicate publisher, he's very much into notes. And he also publishes his own books. This is the Bodily Press. His website is kind of hard to find. He's not a great business person, but you can find it on. May God forgive me for saying this, but you can find it on Amazon. So if you search a thing, that's easier because his thing, he's got like 2 websites, and it's like the Weebly or the whatever, the WordPress or something like that. But he's, he's well-meaning. So, what was what was the question you said about? Sorry.
No, I didn't have a question. I said, talk about the.
Yeah, about the jazz. So
about the jazz section.
Oh yeah. So the notes. So I read the notes, but I try to be sort of brief with the notes because you don't want to get lost. But maybe some people don't know. Like I have a poem about Jackie McLean, right? So you sort of explain why the poem is called Jackie McLean Lives on Mars, right? Because he lived he was from Harlem, but he taught for years at Hartford, Connecticut, and he called Hartford Mars, right? And so there's like little notes that people won't get and some Palestinian political stuff. And I can read that poem, sure. Yeah. So recently he got published. He put on Facebook. Elliot, my publisher. So he had 2 poems in some journal, and the notes of his 2 poems were longer than his poems. So he said, "Well, that's a little self-indulgent." But again, he's well-meaning, and I think we okay. So, okay, Jackie McLean lives on Mars. Jackie McLean lives on Mars. He plays. It's like a running joke.
Excuse me, can we have all our excited?
If I was back in the New York in New York, we just tell that shit. And they would love that shit. New York,
Steve,
from NYU and stuff like that. But I'm a guest here.
No, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, it's my lawyer. And by the way, this is great, but he's charging me by the hour. He's billing me.
Oh no,
My
man.
brother
You
used
might
to.
should go after this. Go to the Improv downtown, man. Get some jokes.
We all yeah. You don't got jokes, Brian. So Jackie McLean lives on Mars. Jackie McLean lives on Mars. He plays a mean saxophone, one of the best on the red planet. He plays and plays and plays sun up to sunset on Mars. Jackie McLean lives on Mars. On Mars, he teaches music theory and the history of jazz, an art form quintessentially American, but with deep roots in Mother Africa, like Jackie himself. Jackie McLean lives on Mars. He briefly talks about the years he lost doing smack, about how close he came to dying as a very young man. Jackie McLean lives on Mars. Sometimes Jackie talks about J. Edgar Hoover and how CONTOPRO infiltrated the Black Panthers and how Ronald Reagan pumped crack into South Central Los Angeles. Jackie McLean lives on Mars. If you ask him, he will tell you about the Coltrane's too, Alice and John, and damn Miles Davis. He may even tell you about the misunderstanding he once had with Charlie Mingus. Sometimes on Mars, you can see Jackie McLean hanging out with his buddy Sun Ra and the poet Henry Dumas, talking about music and poetry and the multiverse. Jackie McLean lives on Mars. On Mars, Jackie plays the sax like nobody ever did, the way he used to when he roamed the streets of Harlem and Hartford. On Mars, Jackie McLean prays 5 times a day and gives thanks to the Creator every blessed day. Jackie McLean lives on Mars. Yes, he does. Jackie McLean lives on Mars. Another? Yeah. Sorry. Oh, okay. So this is a poem a few years ago, because Louisiana, New Orleans, it's very flat. It's like the Delta. Sometimes I miss the mountains, because Lebanon and Palestine are very mountainous, and New York also gets very mountainous. So the Catskills, the Adirondacks. So I told a friend, she's a singer in Mexico City. I said, I miss the mountains. She said, you should go to Chiapas. And so I went to Chiapas I even forget what it was called, but I went to Chiapas. It was very mountainous. And then the thing about, you don't want to generalize, but the thing about Mexico is like people are there's like a joy of life, despite what people are going through. And then so coming back at the airport in Houston, everybody's dour and they're looking at their cell phones and the thing, and it's very cold. So I wrote this poem, I think at the airport, and it's called Analog. I write a letter to my first love on handmade rice paper. I mail it to an address where I know she no longer lives. At the airport in Houston, Young people sit next to each other, eyes fixated to the screens. Excuse me, if you want to talk, can you just talk a little less loud? Thank you. That's Queens. Thank you. Is that pushy? No, if I did that in New Orleans, they'd arrest me. Analog. I write a letter to my first love on handmade rice paper. I mail it to an address where I know she no longer lives. At the airport in Houston, young people sit next to each other, eyes fixated to the screens of either cell phones or laptops. It feels like nobody talks to each other anymore. They say this is the age of information, yet most of humanity seems ill-informed. The world is moving too fast for me. Sometimes I can barely understand the words people use anymore. Everybody says we've made progress, yet my people live under apartheid, an ancient racist system which was supposed to be abolished years ago. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in a world that no longer exists, speaking a language few other people still speak. I love old words like solidarity and liberation. I miss hanging out at the Strand bookstore until closing time. I found refuge in the stacks. When is the last time you held a book in your hands or looked into your lover's eyes? I miss talking to the sidewalk revolutionaries in Union Square Park. Social media has made us collectively antisocial. The term social distancing is an oxymoron. The whole point of socialization is transcending distance. I go to Chiapas, Mexico, and after only 2 weeks there, I feel more at home than I ever have in the U.S. where I was born. New York City of my birth is where exiled poets die. Khalil Gibran, Dylan Thomas, Rashid Hussein, Ronaldo Arenas, Joseph Brodsky, Julio de Burgos, Pedro Pietri. Federico Garcia didn't die when he was in New York, but the fascist Christians assassinated him when he returned to his beloved Granada. I dream of Andalusia before the capital is sold into the highest bidders. I dream of writing poems by the Mediterranean and Free Jaffa, where my father was born. I wished I could have met Charlie Mingus, who was a poet in his way, though he died in Mexico and not New York, where he once lived in Central Park. I think Mingus and I would have been good friends, analog friends, real friends, real friends.
Do you feel, even though it was your parents who were the ones who came here, do you still feel strong connection with the refugee experience?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, because it's personal, you know. So, you know, you meet, like, in my neighborhood, there's a lot of immigrants from a lot of Central America, like Honduras and Guatemala. And there's one of the poets that participated in the poetry festival in Puerto Rico was indigenous from Guatemala, and we had a great connection. Even though my Spanish is not great, his English wasn't great, but we were like each other's favorite poet because he's indigenous, and he's doing this amazing thing with a collective in Guatemala where they're reclamating their indigenous language, and because the thing about Puerto Rico, like, people are very proud of Spanish, but Spanish is also a colonial language, right? It's a prettier language than English, I think so, but it's still colonial, right? So of course, yeah, because every time I think about it, I think about, like, my dad, you know, about, I mean, Trump and the whole thing with the immigrants, even like 8 years ago. That how could you not make it personal? So you try to, you know, build solidarities and empathy, and it's also like, just, you know, I was talking to someone about, like, Steve Scalise, who's my congressional representative, whose grandparents were Sicilian, and Sicilian are, like, you know, because of intermixing with Arabs, they're darker thing, and now, like, he's one of the big proponents of MAGA. And a lot of it is just self-hatred. You know, you see, like, Marco Rubio, whose you know, grandparents were Cuban. And Cruz is like is a whole different thing, because the father, like, an evangelical and stuff, and that's the thing I was saying that, like, I studied theology, but I had a friend here, a great friend when we studied theology. He was from the Philippines, and he said the older you get, the Filipinos say, it's not collecting answers, it's collecting questions. And the thing about religion, it's the thing about certainty. Certainty is a killer because we don't celebrate the mystery anymore. That's why, like what we do as poets, it's an ancient art form. It's kind of like Muriel Rukeyser. She wrote in The Life of Poetry about, she starts with like the cave paintings in Ajanta in India. And that's essentially what we're doing. We're telling stories. Like in our thing, it's like I don't want to generalize, but like in Ethiopia, in African country, like every family has a storyteller. So these are stories. People say, well, they're not all lyrical, and some of it are more prosaic and stuff. I remember. Do you remember Hal Sirowitz? He was a Jewish guy from New York, and he was very big at the Nuyorican, and he would do these poems called Mother Says. And he became like a big thing. And at first I was like, I told Steve kind of like, so loved this guy. I said, well, it's not really poetry, it's not thing. And then I evolved to say, no, that was his story, and that was the way he was telling his story, and it is poetry, And so there's this subjectivity, this country, this whole like this, say about Al Capone, this whole thing, also the edifice of democracy and freedom of speech, but there's also like the reality is like it's homogeneous. And anything that veers out of it is dangerous, And so in a way, this is like the I don't want to like make it so subjective, but in a way, like the most dangerous thing now is a Palestinian poet, if you think about it, right? But it's also like, well, they don't take it seriously, or they don't, But whatever the thing, there's a great solidarity and empathy for immigrants. Yeah.
So I was watching a program that just this morning, and they were talking about Stephen Miller, Trump's guy, Trump's henchman, and
who's dark-skinned Jewish.
His family was from Belarus, in a very small town of 3,000 people. 3,000 Jewish people lived in this town, mostly. And when they started the pogroms and all of that stuff going on, they were forced to leave. But like he said, his uncle was the one talking. He said his uncle said 74 members of their family could not get out. They all were killed, every last one of them. Every last one of them. In his family. And then also in that town of 3,000, that town, only 74 people in total survived whatever was done there to the Jewish people in that town. 74 out of 3,000. And this guy is the cruelest of the cruel. You would think that he would identify.
Well, the wrong one survived.
Right. Well, he wasn't born. This is in the 30s.
No,
so he wasn't even. He wasn't even.
The grandparent.
He wasn't even on the radar.
What they say about him was that he was bullied by Mexican American immigrants in school in California, and
that's
so
the reason why he's a psycho.
That's how people analyze. Well, I think the uncle you're talking about, I think that's the one who's come out against him and stuff like this.
Yeah, he's the one.
That and so
he's not
so the thing,
story.
because we talk about the thing about is about ancestral trauma, right? And the whole thing at one point, because they study this about people individually who have been abused. They either become abusers themselves or they become advocates for people. And so at the end of the day, it's a choice. He has chosen to be a scumbag. He has chosen to be a racist scumbag. He has chosen that. But when I look at it, and I do not want to dismiss it, because when you deal with people like, friend Heather Davis, right, who just got a job, which is great. But Heather was, let go from her government job. So and then you have the immigrant people. Like, this is a real thing that's happening, and it's horrific and terrifying. But it's also sort of very clear about the thing. And then you look at these people; they're impotent. They're totally impotent. And that's not to say that they have the power to think, but at the end of the day, it's just like Netanyahu. He's a coward. That he thought he could just get away with bombing this ancient thing they're very organized in Iran. And all the propaganda, don't believe it. Israel got the shit kicked out of it. And then he begged Trump, and Trump was like, no, I don't want to get involved. And then, they did the backward thing, and then he went on television. Netanyahu went to Greece. Like, he's a coward, just like Trump is a coward. So the way you deal with things, like a shark, you hit it in the nose, And so that's why, like, his shit won't fly in New Orleans. Like, he came to the Super Bowl and brilliant Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar, if you know the Super Bowl show, Kendrick Lamar knew that Trump had beef for years, for decades, with Samuel Jackson, and he got Samuel Jackson to be the MC just to give Trump the thing. And Trump left because all the guys, Scalise and and the guy from Louisiana, Shreveport, who's insignificant, the Speaker of the House, he was a nobody, and that guy's very dangerous because he believes in Christian white nationalism.
Yeah.
You know, so.
So I'm going to read one of the most famous poems by Mahmoud Darwish from 1964. It's called Identity Card. I figure it's an appropriate occasion to read Darwish. It's almost always a good idea to read Mahmoud Darwish. So this is called Identity Card. Write down, I am Arab, and my identity card number is 50,000. I have 8 children, and the 9th will come after a summer. Will you be angry? Write down, I am an Arab, employed with fellow workers at a quarry. I have 8 children. I get them bread, garments, and books from the rocks. I do not supplicate charity at your doors, nor do I belittle myself at the footsteps of your chamber. So will you be angry? Write down, I am an Arab. I have a name without a title. Patient in a country where people are enraged. My roots were entrenched before the birth of time and before the opening of the eras, before the pines and the olive trees, and before the grass grew. My father descends from a family of the plow, not from a privileged class, and my grandfather was a farmer, neither well-bred nor well-born. Teaches me the pride of the sun before teaching me how to read. And my house is like a watchman's hut, made of branches and cane. Are you satisfied with my status? I have a name without a title. Write down, I am an Arab. You have stolen the orchids of my ancestors and the land which I cultivated along with my children. And you left nothing for us except for these rocks. So will the state take them as it has been said? Therefore, write down on top of the first page, I do not hate people, nor do I encroach. But if I become hungry, the usurper's flesh will be my food. Beware, beware of my hunger and my anger. He's a great poet. I heard that poem in Arabic. I don't understand Arabic, so so it's always good to have the English version.
I knew his younger cousin in Queens.
Right.
He drove a limo, and he used to hang out in this hookah place. So I said, well, what? Because I never met Mahmoud, you know, but he's like the big poet of Palestine. So I said, what was he like? He said, because the dude, the cousin, he's much younger than
Mike.
Oh, sorry. So I said, what's he like? And the guy was a little bit conservative religious. So he said, well, I don't think he's a very devout Muslim, he said, because he had like a lot of poetry books in his house, but he didn't have the Quran or anything. So, yeah, Mahmoud Darwish was so he, and the thing about, like, sometimes it's not with you, but like sometimes people will drop his name because he was the most sort of translated. But like you see now, if you're on like Instagram or Facebook or something, like there's a lot of Palestinian poets. There's like we are a nation of poets, and this is the way we articulate things, you know. And I met where I'm staying. I met a guy who's from Tunisia, and when I told him I'm a poet, like, because Arabs, like, they love poetry, you know, and so. But Darwish, yeah, that was like the first sort of poem that really set him.
You want to tell people about some Arab poets who they might want to check out? Would you read? Or poets in general. It doesn't have to. They don't have to be Arab.
Well, this is one of my favorite books I mentioned before. June Jordan, her collected work is there, and June wrote a lot about Palestine, moving towards home. Where she wrote, she said, "I was born a black woman, but now I am Palestinian," and so that's more than solidarity. Like I said, that's love. That's love, you know, and it's not, you know, this is all these fine lines of things. It's not appropriation, because she went there and she went to the refugee camps, and she walked amongst the people, you know. So it wasn't like sometimes people now like everything is after the genocide and stuff like. Yeah, but where were you before? Apartheid's been happening for more than 77 years, and before that there were the British. Like what about that? You know, and so you get like a little, you know, Spider-Man from Queens, and you get that Spidey sense of, no, this is true solidarity and this is not that, you know. But then what happens is, like, sometimes you're like, then now it's become like, the thing is so crazy that like charity has become like a political act because people are starving, you know. And that's, you know, in Ethiopia too, like the when people say, well, these are lands that, you know, like the whole thing I mentioned before, the milk of land and honey. The fact that there's a famine, this because also you got to understand, this is why they want it, because also the oil reserves in the Mediterranean, but also it's coast, right? So it's a very fertile thing. With the water, we grow watermelons there and olives and figs, and it's very verdant, very rich. But it's not if you don't have water. And so they block the water. They block baby formula. Like, are you scared of, like, baby jihadists? Like, no, I mean, it's a joke. Like, we use humor as a thing, but it's and then the thing that just gets you is that the American cover of it, and then also like the other Anglo, like Germany and British, the cover of it is like they can do whatever they want and they will never be held accountable. And you say, well, like, why, what's, you know? But you see, like, the world turning now, and the solidarities that the brother Chris Smalls was at Busboys and Poets 3 days ago, and Chris started, you know, and that connection between labor rights, what he did with Amazon, right? And then he connects with things just like, and they sullied her too, Greta Thunberg, right? And the thing about the environment, people say, oh, the environment, don't talk about Gaza. They don't even, because they don't make connections. The level of emissions that all of these, like, cluster bombs and all the things, it doesn't just affect there and the people that they've dehumanized. Well, it's just them. It affects the whole world. Because the sky and the atmosphere doesn't have boundaries. So it's not like, oh, okay, this is not going to affect, like, white suburban people. it affects the whole world. But then they do the you know, the rope-a-dope, the you know, in Israel the word hasbara, which is the propaganda machine, and America's done that, like, you know, misinformation. Total misinformation.
All right, so those who's just coming in, we have our guest is Paul Codifago. His new book is The Palestinian Freedom Now Suite on the Bodily Press. And I'm going to ask Paul to read one more poem, and then we'll kick it out to the audience for comments and questions, and or whatever you want to read from. It's up to you. And then we'll open it up to the audience to ask some questions about poetry.
Well, we should make it good then.
Palestine.
That's the last one.
Yeah, we're just trying to get an audience a chance to participate here.
Yeah, we don't want to end on a low note. Do you have a suggestion?
No, I don't.
Thanks, Brian.
I would say Sun Ra in Gaza, but you might not want to read that one.
Why not?
Sun Ra writes a poem in Gaza. So we'll end with some spaces to place Sun Ra.
It's going to challenge your
I didn't know he hung
Well, you
out.
know, people-
I didn't know he hung out in Gaza. You know?
well, people like, you know, the like surreal or the. No, they ask me, like, where you from, and I want to get into it. I say, well, I'm just from Mars, you know.
So we'll hear from Paul, and then we'll feel free to come up with some questions.
So the book is it's in 4 sections. The first section is origins, and the second section is the Palestinian Freedom Now Suite, and the third section is exile words, and the last section is called jazz poems and a song for Fairuz. Fairuz was the great, I think maybe I mentioned before, the great singer of Lebanon, who just is 90 years old. So Sun Ra writes a poem in Gaza. Touch the sun with your fingertip. Sun Ra, born in Birmingham, travels overnight to Gaza and plays bongos on the beach. He says the world can be a goddamn mushroom cloud, or it could be Sarah Vaughan's voice. Sun Ra writes a poem in Gaza. I have seen some shit, he says. He sings a song his mother taught him. He cries. Sun Ra lets out a cry from his gut. The world is burning here in Gaza, everywhere. Sun Ra writes a poem in Gaza. He says, it is so easy to lose hope. He looks up to the sky and he says, space is the place. Sun Ra touches the sun with his fingertip. Sun Ra writes a poem in Gaza, plays football with Palestinian kids. That's the real football, not American football. Not that brutal, like you walk in and you get a concussion. When they sign the thing, the contract. Sun Ra writes a poem in Gaza, plays football with Palestinian kids orphaned by the genocide. Sun Ra eats falafel with 100 Palestinian comrades on the beach. It is so easy to lose hope, he says. Nobody's free unless everybody's free, free, free. Sun Ra plays music with Palestinian revolutionaries in Gaza City. Sun Ra laughs. He says, they will never get me alive. Sun Ra sings from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea, Sun Ra sings. Space is the place. Sun Ra writes a poem in Gaza. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, another hand for Paul.
Yeah, can I write can I read the last poem?
Go ahead.
Because I mentioned Feiruz. So Feiruz's son just died, and I was great fortune to be on Joni's show. And then 2 days later, I was on Zayn Amin's show, Shai Wa Nana, and we talked a lot about Arab jazz. And so Sun Ra's son, who just died, he was a great hero, leftist music producer and playwright and musician in his own right, Ziad Rahbani. And when he died, it was a big thing in Lebanon because he was a great revolutionary artist. And so, there's a word like the Lebanese and Palestinian mothers say, my mom used to say this, tubrini. Tubrini means the mother, because nobody talks more shit than Arabs, right? So and everything is like the comedian from Houston, Mo Amer, is hilarious. He says it's not like when we say hello, it's not like what's up. It's like, may the blessings of the blessed be blessed upon you, and the blessings of the blessing, and then your cousin's blessed, and then the curses are even worse. And we're about the body parts, and it turns your head a little bit. But no, we talk a lot of shit. So, but Levantine mothers, Palestinian Lebanese mothers, they say to their kids, to burni, and to burni literally means the mother says to the child, I pray that you bury me before I bury you. So when I learned this, because I've always been obsessed with words, I said, Mama, don't say that. And she said, well, that's the natural order of things. I said, yeah, but just don't say it. So Feiruz, who's 90 years old, lives in Paris, and from Lebanon, same section of Lebanon that near Beirut in the mountains, very beautiful, where my family's from. And so Feiruz just buried her son. She's 90 and he's 69, was 69. Feiruz takes you home. Familiar music comes from the room next to the room you are in now. The music startles and soothes you. Yesterday, it is a woman's smooth and otherworldly voice. He's singing in Arabic, your mother's tongue. The singer's voice is sweet like honey in the morning. It is sweet like honey in the morning. The singer is Feiruz. She is singing a song about the moon being closer to her than her neighbor. Her voice pierces the night. You are far away from your people, far away from occupied Palestine, far away from apartheid and genocide, far away from Lebanon and Syria. You are far away from the beautiful besieged homelands of your ancestors. You are far away from the Stone Sea. But Feiruz transports you there, takes you home, takes you to the ports of Jaffa and Sidon and the streets of Damascus and Beirut. Feiruz takes you away from this cold, strange place, away from your exile. Today, Feiruz takes you home. She takes you home. So that thing that, so in all like the Arab world, that's a very famous expression. That because they always say like the two great female singers of thing was Feiruz, and they say Feiruz is in the morning, and then at night she was like Billie Holiday, Kulthum in Egypt, right. and it was more like sort of dusky and thing. But the two great saying they were friends, you know, like in America everything is beef, right? Right. But they were great friends, and but that's an expression, Mithal Asal. To listen to Feiruz is like eating honey, and when I said she sings a song that it's a song she sang. Jaran, like the moon is closer to her than the neighbor, you know, and that's the last poem in the book.
All right, so just open this up for comments or questions from the audience. Anybody can chime in, ask about the book, about craft.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was curious, right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I've
heard, lights.
I've heard that in Arabic there's a lot of kind of clever wordplay, even kind of in common speaking and phrases.
Sure.
And so I was curious about the difference in experience for Palestinian poetry read in English versus in the Arabic language, and also Palestinian poetry written like in English first versus
Sure.
written in Arabic first, and any of your experiences
Oh
around
yeah.
that.
Well, it's something I think about all the time, right? That, and I have a poem about it called Cow and I's Tongue, where I write, because we grew up where my parents, who both spoke Arabic, because my mom was born in Lebanon, my dad, well, born in Egypt, but she was Lebanese and grew up in Lebanon, and my dad was Palestinian, but was educated in Egypt. But they, as Christians, they went to French colonial schools. So growing up, and my brothers were born in Beirut. I'm the first person in my family ever born in this country. So the whole question about language, right, is that, like I tell people, and I tell Arabs this, like I write Arabic poems, Palestinian poems, using the oppressor's language, right? Right. So I'm using this thing, and so there's like, it's not schizophrenia. It's like, was it the disembodied or what's the thing in psychology? It's total disassociation. It's artistic disassociation, linguistic disassociation, and I'm cognizant of that, right? So that's one of the reasons why. And it's not because, oh, you don't know how to write lyrical poetry. You don't know, bro. I can write like iambic pentameter. Let me tell you, I can do that. But I purposely, and part of it again, the influence of the Umbra and Black Arts and New York, where and June Jordan, where I said, well, no, this is my style, and maybe in your face, maybe some of them are less lyrical than others. But I'm cognizantly doing this because we have a political imperative. And that imperative is there, so I want some clarity. But I will tell you, I am not in love with English. I'm just not in love with it. If this offends people, I'm sorry. You know, and I don't mean you, but I mean no, because I could sense the progressiveness and the solidarity. Yeah, no, but again, it's not like I'm not like it's so tiring and the general, you know, the grieving and stuff. Like it's just art, and this is the art now. And so, but I'm not gonna take it. Oh, let me read another poem. But I do have a poem called Cow and I's Tongue, and it speaks about that. So my parents, who were educated in French schools, who wrote or spoke Arabic, they preferred that we speak French at home because they thought. And I love my parents. This is not like, you know, like you're my psychologist and I'm on a thing. And let me tell you, I have issues with my parents. I love my parents. They were amazing parents. But they just the way they thought that French had more value than Arabic. And then you look, Arabic is one. I'm sorry, but it's one of the great languages for poetry. And I don't resent my thing because I understand like what it was, right? And maybe it's true about the real world and what it is. And so I'm fluent in French. So I write about that because the two great oppressors before Zionists, that the two great oppressors were the English and the French, and these were entities that hated each other. But after World War II, the World War I, The one thing they agreed on was to screw Africa and Arabs. So you take this, and then you look at the map of Africa, and it's all like jagged the way they think, because it's insanity. And that's colonialism, right? So growing up, the only Arabic that I ever knew, because I'm the youngest of three brothers, and I always, Azar in Arabic means like hooligan, and I never wanted to sleep. So like my parents in Arabic would say Rahnam, which means go to sleep. That was the only Arab I knew for a long time, you know. So I see English like as a, it's a tool. You know, but like the MF, you know, Masters of Fine Arts thing and the Anglo editors and stuff, most of them, they're not great fans, you know. But the feeling is mutual. So,
Any more questions?
oh,
I think I'm just want to add something. I think
oh,
you know, the colonial language has to be liberated, but it can't be liberated if the thought system is not liberated.
Absolutely.
But to me, language is not the issue. The thought system.
Absolutely.
Colonialism has perverted our thinking.
Sure.
And then our art is organized according to that linguistic syntax.
absolutely.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you see it in my writing, but that's one of the projects, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to do. And then it's all different things, like a thing about recognition and who you're writing for, audience, you know, and things like that. So, thanks.
I just had a question, sir. Would you compare the occupation of D.C., militarized occupation, with Gaza, and if so, why?
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. Well, because it's occupation. No, well, you know, and I don't mean to make that glib or dismiss, not dismissive, but like to be, you know, like I said, glib. There's a great writer, African American writer in New Orleans called Christina K. Robinson, and she's badass, and she calls New Orleans an occupied city. It's New Orleans, as much as it's like, oh, it's fun town, and you go there and public intoxication and everything like this, and it's a city that's 61% of the population is African American, but 31% of African Americans live under the poverty line. That's occupation, right? So it's not like, yes, there's the actual thing of military thing, but then there's the thing about unseen occupation. You know, a lot of your work is about gentrification, and you said this. I think I knew it before you said it, but I never articulated the way you did that gentrification is a local form of colonization, right? And so you make those connections. These are connections that I think we know, especially if you come from oppressed peoples. But to do that and say, oh, and that's where the empathy comes in and say, well, yeah, so when I was coming in, I came in last night, yesterday afternoon. In a way, it's not like, oh, I feel like comfort. I'm not comfortable with occupation, but it's something we know, right? And it's not like we have like we've mastered it because we're still under occupation, but it's something familiar to say, like we've been struggling against it. And so, you know, I've had arguments with people about the word. People like to use sometimes the word resilient. And like you go to Puerto Rico, they hate that word because it kind of tastes like, you know, like the perfect victim sort of thing. We say samud, and samud is it's like if you know za'atar spice or in Ethiopia like Berber. It's complex, so it's different elements of things. But samud part, one of the things of that word is steadfastness and resolve, and it's also keeping the faith, not in religion, but keeping the faith of life and a spirit of life that we will not give up, and we will continue. And so the Anas, who's the journalist who was assassinated, and sort of now has become like an emblem of the resistance. And my friend is related. He's a distant cousin of my friend here who lives here in D.C. And they assassinated 28 years old. 28 years old. And his nephew now has taken over, and he's now a journalist, and so he literally took on the vest and the mantle, because we're not gonna give up. So you can, and you try to erase everybody, but you can't erase. Someone said yesterday, like I joked about it, because there's two Palestinian museums. There's one here, one in Connecticut. So I joked, I said, we have no state, but we have two museums, right? But someone said, well, we may not have a state, but we have a homeland. We have a nation, right? And the nation it's in our hearts. You can't kill that, and they know that. And it's almost like, but also the very cynical thing is about economics. There are entities that are making a lot of money for years on occupation, like the stuff that's happening here. It's all about money. It's all about money. It's also like the thing Toni Morrison with racism. It's the rope-a-dope of not thinking about this pedophile and being in files, like confirming that he's a pedophile. Just like he didn't want to be president again. He just didn't want to go to prison. And then he's got to justify, and then you have like the maniacs that, like his whole, like the Game of Thrones shit, like they all hate each other. The Christian evangelicals and the QAnon and the Proud Boy. What the fuck do you have you have no right to be proud. The Proud Boys are, excuse my language, I'm sorry.
You're from Queens, man. Don't worry about it.
Thanks, Brian. The attorney said it was okay. $250 an hour. But he's worth it, though. He's worth it.
Hey, Paul, Kenny Carroll here.
Yeah, no, I looked.
Right.
I
We'll do that in a minute.
I'm gonna cry.
Right. But so, Paul, you've been on this, man, and I think it was 3 years ago you had the reading down at Busboys and Poets.
4 years ago.
4 years ago.
And you had
I was supposed to
poll
be there, but my son
with
was
your
there.
son.
Yeah.
And so we had your son go first, in spoken word, the sacrificial lamb.
Right.
Man, he kicked it out of the park.
Yeah, that kid is good.
Oh.
But I wanted to ask you, Paul, as we're thinking about your connections to D.C., and it kind of goes with the question about occupation, but and I know you're hip to it, the anthology Enemies of the Sun, which I
Yeah.
think was published in 1971 here in D.C.
Yeah.
by Drummond Spear Bookstore. And Charlie Cobb, Gaston Neal, all those people associated with the bookstore. And I wonder if you had any reflection on that, because when this current Holocaust started, there was two kind of lines. One that people like me and Brian, who come out of the Black Arts movement, been directly influenced by Baraka and June George, we were like, this is our fight too.
Yeah.
Then another strain, which is the petty bourgeois strain of black writers who wanted to align themselves with the Democratic Party and Biden and Harris, who were like, we got to uphold Israel, right? So talk about that connection
Sure.
between the black arts, black writers, and Palestine.
So, like and I know you had an interaction with Steve Cannon.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So, Steve was a great friend, and like I always joke, like Steve was kind of known like being kind of cheap, but I always get because I have my nonprofit in New York after September 11. We did poetry festivals, and I would get I miss him every day, and so Steve was Umbra, and so Umbra was in the Lower East Side, and Baraka lived in the Lower East Side, and then he went up to Harlem. But Steve was also, because Steve from Pigeontown in New Orleans, right? And he grew up with Ellis Marcellus. And so Steve had this thing about music, and he always had a piano in his at Tribes. And so when this is a very very rich question you ask. But they're all threads, in the Sufi they call Tawit Suf. And it's the threads of the prophet and how everything is connected. It's all connected. But we're not supposed to connect. So because I had an experience, and I posted on Facebook thing, and I love the New Yorker will always be very special to me, because it gave me a sort of jumping off thing. And I love spoken word for years, And tomorrow, that's what we're going to be doing. That's going to be more, with the jazz, that's going to be more spoken word. And so, and that also the spoken word, that's our tradition. Like that poem that you read right down in there, that's a piece. And Darwish would be like rock concerts. like 40,000 people, you know, and so yeah, and because also the musicality of Arabic, right? And so with Steve, like, so I was doing, and I never wanted, it wasn't like a, because the thing about it, and I think maybe it was similar this way, right? Like as organizers, but also as artists, right? That I got indoctrinated in leftist Palestinian politics around the time that I started writing seriously. I was like 20, 21, 22 years old. And so the whole thing about, you know, again, I don't want to diss anybody MFA or something like that. Because you could be a great poet and get an MFA, but getting an MFA does not make you a great poet, right? And also, like, so we knew 30 years ago that the university, you know, Edward Said was a very special person that could sort of like dance around things and his personal charisma. I'm the grandson of a diplomatic judge from my mom's side. I am not a diplomatic person. I take more the Palestinian like thing, and so and I have a very, you know, that's one of the reasons Charlie Mingus is one of my sort of patron saints, because you know they always say, oh, Mingus was violent, he had this temper. That's not the case. Mingus did not suffer fools lightly, and Mingus loved his art form. Like I've heard like something a lot of time white people say, oh, but calling yourself a poet is pretentious. It's not. It's a calling. And it's also an ancestral thing. So your son now has taken it's a lineage, right? And so, you know, like my uncle was a poet, and so like for years I never wanted, just as a leftist thing, when I started doing spoken word, I never wanted to compete against other poets, because I thought that even poets you may disagree with or whatever, but we're all sort of a family of things. So the whole slam thought, you know, and I know he came here to Washington for the funeral, and I don't want to diss anyone's thing, but like Bob Holman never talks about the fact that he's Jewish from Kentucky, you know, and he was on the board of New Eurekan, and then he went and he wanted the money thing with Bowery, but and also he got like with Steve, he was close to Steve, because Steve he had that New Orleans thing with the music, but also like his temperament was, but also Steve did not suffer fools either. But he had a sort of, he was diplomatic, because Steve had a doctorate in world affairs. And Steve, you know, he taught at Medgar Evers for years. His boss was Betty Shabazz. And I posted this thing where you called me, not called me out, but I said, well, Steve Cannon said that he mentored Gil Scott-Heron and at Medgar Evers, and that Steve took credit for, not that, like, he said Gil wrote The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, but he had shown it to Steve. And he said, well, no, there's no evidence. Because part of the thing about Steve liked to talk a lot of shit. A lot of shit. So sometimes you'd have to, like, sort of... In Arabic, we say makluta, it means, like, the mix. Because even Tribes was like this. But the thing about Tribes was that it was authentic, and it was real. And so he had, for the thing, like, I was not the only Palestinian, famously Suhair Hamad, right? Like, I think you posted about Leora Cohen, right? And you know, that whole thing when she went, because she was very young, when so she didn't have, like, the political thing. And I don't begrudge, because she's an extraordinary talent. And also Samia Halabi was the older Palestinian. She's a leftist for the Popular Front. And she would go to Tribes. And so one night I was like, because I did the open mic, the amateur thing. Do you know Keith Roach? Yeah. So Keith was the MC. Yeah, I remember. So one night I did a set, and a lot of times it was about Palestine. But I never wrote an anti-Semitic thing in my life, because that's not, you know. And so a young couple who were like light-skinned, they walked out. But they didn't say they walked out because they were offended or because they thought I was anti-Semitic or whatever. Maybe they had dinner. You know, it's New York. They had dinner. Who knows? So Julio, the thing about the New Eurekan was that it's like a poetry thing that had a bouncer. Yeah. And Julio was known to hate poetry and poets. Right. And he was this ex-cop who I always said looked like Foghorn and Leghorn, right? And he was this big dude whose cousin was Miguel Algarin. And so he gave him like this little side hustle. Right. And he should not have been there. Because he just like, but I guess it was like part of the cocktail of you know, part of the story there and stuff. But so after my set, Julio and Keith Roach came up to me and they said, essentially they said, you're fucking with the money. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, this Jewish couple walked out. I said, how do you know they're Jewish? They didn't say anything. They said, well, we think, and so Keith said to me, well, you got to tone it down. So I said, shut the fuck up. I said, and because I have short-term memory, I can't, not short-term, but I can't retain shit because I was bullied as a kid because of being Arab features in the big Catholic high school in Queens. And so biology is all memorization. The only thing I ever memorized was hermaphrodite, which is the organism that has the male and female sexual organs, right? So I can't. So when I was doing the shit, it actually made me a better writer because you do, even though it wasn't competition, but like for fun, they did the amateur thing. But I never did the like Sylvana Strauss said, I didn't know because she did the touring thing, right? And then like Hallman like took you to the diner or whatever the fuck, and like I didn't do that competition thing, right? But in the amateur thing, like I did all right? And so they said like this, and so I had the words on the paper because I couldn't memorize it, right? So I threw the paper thing. I said, and that was the last time I ever did it there. Not. Yeah, and then that's how like my thing with Tribes got stronger, because Steve was there, and then like that was authentic, and that was love, And the thing about the New Rican is the telltale capitalist thing about the money. Yeah. So did that answer your question, Ken?
Yeah, a poet's answer will not end. So there's
That's your Arab poet.
how human beings question.
There's some history. Oh, there.
So, thank you, Paul, for being here, and thank you for sharing your poetry as a fellow Brooklynite. My question, I was getting my food. I wanted to hear your poem on jazz, but I did miss it. But can you elaborate more on how, within the Palestinian culture, how music plays a role as a resource for healing?
Oh, well, like the Palestinian national anthem. I forgot the full title of it, but is it Baladi, like our homeland, right? Motini. And Motini was written by a poet named Ibrahim Tukan. And his sister became sort of well known because in the generation of Darwish, Fadwa Tukan. And they were like very bourgeois family from Nablus, which is a revolutionary thing in the West Bank in the mountains. But so the poets, it's very similar, like Puerto Rican thing, like the Don Pedro Albizu Campos, the national thing. His advisors were all poets. Right, so like no, Stephen Miller is not a poet. Like you can say a lot of shit about Stephen Miller, but that motherfucker don't know like a rhyme from a crime. So the national anthem, the Palestinian national anthem, was written by a poet, and so like my thing with the jazz, like growing up, my dad loved opera. And he tells stories when he lived in Cairo, the great opera house in Cairo. And I love my dad, but you know how, like, I'm sure your children, like, some of you want to veer off from your thing. And my dad loved opera, so I never, like, I took a lift from where I'm staying in DuPont Circle, and she had the opera thing on. And I was like, no, and I also, like, I was engaged in opera, Lebanese opera singer. And so I'm not big fans of opera. Like one time we had a fight, and I said, well, opera is a bourgeois art form. So I had a friend in college, my freshman year of college, Alan Arnold, who was from Mount Vernon, which is where Denzel Washington's from. And Alan was, he was very, this is like in the time of like Michael Stewart and Yusuf Hawkins, right? So there were like a lot of demonstrations, a lot of time like in Harlem. And so he took me. My first demonstrations were not Palestinian demonstrations. They were demonstrating mostly like African Americans. And he sort of gave me, before my Palestinian leftist thing, Alan like would take me. And Alan was a great lover of jazz. And so he turned me on to jazz. And the first concert we went together was Ahmed Jamal. Oh man, Ponciana, man. That, when my funeral, because I know I'm gonna die before you. I want have him do the Ponciana, man.
All right, the question.
Okay, what does that answer? So the thing about so the healing is well.
But also, I think I think her question goes further. She's talking really about the folk Palestinian musical tradition and its implication to Palestinian poetry.
Yeah.
And in the end, its spiritual benefit.
Sure. So,
Am I
so
wrong?
Similar to how in the African American culture, we, music
Spiritual, yeah.
really
Sure. Well,
allowed us to heal from the
Yeah.
constant pain.
so the poem that Brian read, we say Hawiye is the identity card. That poem is like most Palestinians know that poem, and so what it is that poetry is not just on the page, but it's incantation and it's community. So the vibration of music, and there's no like music is like the oration, like griots, right? So that's why for a long time I did not have a compunction, because I was also a reporter, so I'd see my byline. I did not have a compunction to be published, because I think it's very like strange to have a thing there. But then the genocide started, and then you see like a lot of cats coming and they're talking about this shit, and like no one's taking you seriously, because in America, if you don't have a commodity, they don't take your thing. So the dude who Alan Abrams, and like he approached me, and it became kind of a shit show. but at the same time, and sort of a telltale. And you told me that you said well, you should use it as a story. But we're not going to tell the story now, because I'm proud of the book, and in three, and this very thing about being an artist, that there's that little narcissist peacock thing. But in less than a year, I've had 3 books published. The second was in Spanish in Puerto Rico. But what it is more than that, when I take the thing of, and I use the word Palestinian, and it's from my dad's side, and my grandfather and my great grandfather, and then the tradition of Palestinian resistance poetry, even though I'm different because I write in English, it's still Palestinian resistance. So when I chose the thing, which is a riff off Max Roach's thing, the Palestinian, it was purposeful, and it's to say whatever's happening. I understand it's more than it's grieving. I hung out with my friend yesterday, Hani, and you could see the everyday grief. Two brothers since November 2023, endless cousins and nephews, and his cousin now, the journalist Anas. But what it is, that's the sumud. We don't give up. We don't give up. And like yesterday, he bought me falafel. It's a very Arabic, and we joked, like people say, how could you be joking? Because we're living, and it's not disrespectful, because they're cracking jokes in Gaza. Sorry, sorry that we're not the perfect victim, but they're cracking jokes in, So you know what I'm saying? Because it's yeah. So does that answer your question a little bit? So the repetition of the stories, and of the songs and the folklore, and that poem that he wrote in the early 60s became part of the folklore. But also the song that became, but it was a poem. But it was a poem that was memorized. Motini, which was our homeland, was a poem by Ibrahim Toucan, and it's repeated. And you see sometimes in the reels or the TikTok, and they're singing the song, and it's a song. This is my homeland. This is my homeland. So thank you.
One more question.
Paul, I wanted to ask you, could you share the words to the Palestinian national anthem? And I'm just wondering how people,
Yeah, I know.
what the Palestinian, does the national anthem mean a lot? Like you could say, like, lift every voice and sing when people.
Oh yeah. Well,
So
like I said,
tell us a little bit about that, because
So he wrote it.
who wrote it?
So Ibrahim Toucan, he wrote it. I think maybe 1935, 36. It was the driving. You know how like in the different movements there are songs. It was the driving sort of song and repeating in the 1936 general boycott, which was the biggest demonstration against the British mandate, which is a fancy way to say colonization, when the British, from the end of World War I to like 1917 to 1948. And so that poem Motini that became the song was the driving force of the thing. So I don't, because like I said, I don't memorize things, but you can Google it. Just repeating my homeland, you know. So and so it you know, and people that's why the poets and like Darwish was in prison a lot until he was exiled. Samuel Qasim. Sammy was the guy who wrote the thing, the Sun thing. And Sammy wrote a poem about Lumumba. Yeah. You know.
But is it sung a lot, like, for example, Lift Every Voice and Sing?
Well, it's the national anthem. Yeah. And people memorize it, you know.
Where do Palestinian movement breaks away from the Arab nationalist aspect of the struggle?
Well, I think what's happened, but you could say similar happened in South America or in Africa, that you know, and I can look at the history and criticize us that we were looking for alliances and solidarities with wrong entities, right? So you have like Arab regimes like Saddam or Saudi who were oppressing their own people, and yet, especially the countries with oil, they had resources, and so we you know, you took all these millions of dollars or what for the movement, and inherently it's a corruption, because now what's happening is sort of a reckoning that the alliances that are being made now is what should have been done for a long time, aligning yourself with other people in struggle, so the indigenous peoples or whatever, poor peoples, people that have been victimized by capitalism. And so I understand what you're saying about the Arab regimes, but I also think it's sort of like a playbook of, you know, like Machiavelli and colonialism, that you buy. So, and this is what I'm saying, because you said stay away. But the Palestinian Authority is also
let me explain why
a byproduct of that colonialism.
Well, let me say this to you. In the black struggle, you take Du Bois, Frantz Fanon, on the pitfalls of black nationalism. Is there a regret? Is there a movement? Is there a poetry? Is there a song against blind Arab nationalism is what my question is, because the pitfalls of Arab nationalism has a lot to do with the situation, in my view.
Well, I mean, if you ask me personally, I don't, like, the word Arab is from Ibn Arabi, right? Like, we're not Arabs, technically, right? We're Semites and we're Levantine, and it's a different culture, it's a different tenor, and just because of the way we're situated in the world, there's more connection with, you know, like the thing about Saudi Arabia, you know, and I don't want to get into saying something controversial, but like they weren't connected just because of where they were. Do you know what I mean? But then they got connected because of the oil and because of money, and then they were easily corrupted. And so I don't disagree with you. Has the regret or the resistance to that seeped into cultural life in Palestinian poets writing about it or this and that? I don't think yet. But I think, also now, it's kind of like Samuel Qasim, right, wrote a poem after the apocalypse, right? We're in the midst of an apocalypse, right? So right now is like our children need to eat. And I'm not dismissing what you're saying, but I'm saying eventually that's going to come, because it's clear that Dubai is not with us. Dubai is just wants to be another outpost of the West, and all that money, all those resources, you know. So obviously, like I agree with what you're saying. I just don't think that it's not that the moment isn't there now, but like that's not a thinking of it. Even the thing with the Palestinian Authority is like all Palestinians know that the Palestinian Authority is corrupt. Everybody knows, but at the same time, it's like, well, we need to get food into Gaza. Like that, and that's where the level of thing is, you know. Does that answer your question, or not really? Artist and artist.
Nothing
I
could be
really got an
answered.
opinion. That's
No,
right.
seriously.
This is his house.
Answer. No,
Like
excuse
in
me.
Queens, they have like the basketball court.
Listen, answering.
Yes, sir.
It's not the question of answering. I think entertaining discussion will take us to
Yeah.
further questioning the issue. That's all I
So-
care.
so
Yeah.
Answering is another.
No, and I appreciate you. And yeah. So
I'd follow up real quick saying, like, so in terms of the Palestinian people, who in that region do you think is a true ally of the Palestinian people? I'm talking countries or groups, organizations, whatever. Who do you think? Which organization or country that you feel like they're actually
In
truly
the-
on
in-
side of the Palestinian
region?
people? In that
maybe
region.
maybe Oman,
Gotcha.
maybe like they're the most progressive of the Gulf states, and they haven't been corrupted as much, you know. But it you know, like Egypt is not, and it's heartbreaking because like my dad 44 years in Egypt, and Egypt is like I had the guy that guy, you know, the lawyer, remember William Kunstler, and then Kunstler's guy Ronald Kuby, who took over. So Kuby is a Facebook friend of mine, and Kuby wrote something like, I said something about Egypt and like being the sort of not the head of like an important part of the vanguard of like the African thing. He said, well, he did this thing that white people did, like he tried to educate them. Well, it's different because that's not black Africa. It's still Africa. and also like Anwar Sadat was black, right? You know, from Nubia. So who's the, you know, whatever his things were with Camp David. But answering your question, no, I'm trying to like diffuse it because it's depressing. I don't. I mean, they're human rights organizations. But the thing about it is that like the oppression for the Egyptian people because of Sisi, who's on the tit of America, right? Jordan is a shit show, and Jordan half of the population of Jordan is Palestinian. The Queen of Jordan is Palestinian, and yet he's like he let Israel use their space to bomb the West Bank and Lebanon. And Lebanon is just like, and they want that, it's like, who's it? Naomi Klein, like the endless war, what's the shock doctrine? Like they want the thing. And it's so funny because like our compunction, not to say that we can't fight and we can't think like anybody can take a gun, but like our compunction is to write songs. And to connect our food and so you have this brutality, and then you have like these, you know, these puppet regimes that all install the thing, and they've all now recognized Israel, and so you know, and you know what, we're still resisting.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much.
And he has some books that he might sell to you, and of course there are plenty of books in the store for you to purchase as well. And we're here to chop it up some more if you want off the camera.
That's an old school expression. Chop it up. Chop it up.
Brian.